How good can a multi-track mix sound using microcassette as the audio source for each instrument? Actually, you know what? Here's a much more accurate question. What would a multi-track mix sound like using microcassette as the source for each instrument? In the previous video, we explored the unsurprising limitations of microcassette, and I outlined the audio mix experiment I was about to undertake. I scoured the web looking for any such prior experiment, and for the life of me, I could not find any documented attempt. At most, I found someone who used microcassette as a lo-fi effect with his synthesizers, but I found absolutely zero documentation on anyone using microcassette as the source for each individual isolated instrument track in an attempt to build a mix and mastered final product. So, here is the answer to a question literally nobody was asking, at least online. First, this is not going to be a detailed lecture on audio engineering theory, nor a how-to tutorial. However, I will absolutely address the concerns from the previous video and show you what I did to extract what I could from such a crippled audio source. I'll tell you right now, the results on the whole were mostly as expected, but there were some unexpected surprises that legitimately had me giddy with laughter at the sheer absurdity of what I was doing, or more accurately, what I was able to do. Maybe able is a stretch, but you'll see exactly what I mean shortly, or here, rather. I'll explain things as we go, but let's get to what most of you probably came here for.
Play some audio, you goof!
Okay, we'll see if this is recognizable enough to trip a copyright strike. The song used is from the stems to a cover of Everlong by the Foo Fighters, performed by a cover band posted on SoundCloud by a guy named DJ Bean. All the links are below. What a freaking mouthful. I did, however, redub the vocals using my own voice. The original cover singer's vocals were just too robotically auto-tuned. Anyway, here is what the unprocessed microcassette-based mix sounds like. No EQ, effects, or otherwise. Sounds exactly like you'd expect, right? Well, here's the meat and potatoes. Here's what we all came here for. Here's what I could do with the mix after major surgery. Obviously, it lacks the full fidelity and frequency response of a well-recorded and produced Foo Fighters album, but still, and it sounds ridiculous to say this, it sounds much better than I ever expected, given the medium, microcassette. For further reference, here is the exact same passage of this song I mixed a few weeks ago like a normal person. Okay, so for those interested, let's go over how I was able to do whatever it was I was able to do with this. First, while I could extract with great effort some low-end material, there was almost nothing that could be done with the high end past about 8 kHz. And even using 8 kHz as a reference right there is being extremely generous. This means I could make the kick drum recognizable as a kick drum and the bass recognizable as a bass. Notice I said recognizable, not sound good. But instruments like cymbals that live in the high end sound absolutely atrocious. Also, vocals. There's a lot of what is referred to as air and realism in the upper frequencies of vocals beyond 8 kHz that were simply unattainable with my microcassette recorder. A note here about microcassette high end. In my previous video, I mentioned that the hiss might be overwhelming in this mix, but actually, it is virtually non-existent. My recorder is obviously employing some form of noise reduction to reduce or eliminate hiss. Matter of fact, you can see this. Look how the frequency response nosedives after about 6.5 kHz. This is actually not ideal. I would have preferred the hiss with no noise reduction. A lot of useful material exists in that hiss, especially with cymbals and vocal air. In other words, it would have been more hissy, but have sounded a lot more natural. Also, disappointingly, recording distorted guitars to the microcassette was giving the noise reduction system fits. It confused the distortion going into or off the tape as hiss and turned it into a warbly attenuated mess. Since the guitar stems themselves were recorded clean, I removed the distortion and ran the clean microcassette guitars through an amp plugin later. This tortured my soul. Just keep that grain of sand in mind. They are clean microcassette guitars run through an amp sim later. Now, on to the low end. This is what I was most surprised by. Notice the gradual slope as opposed to the high end's abrupt cliff. This tells me that while it would require significant and absurd amounts of boost, there may be something there to work with, and sure enough, there was. Now, I had to put several layers of low-end boost on the kick to bring out the thump. I had to do the same with the bass guitar to give the rhythm section a more solid foundation. Just ungodly amounts of maximum low-end gain stacked mercilessly on top of each other. From there, I did the normal mixing things. I panned, I balanced, I gated, I compressed, I EQ'd what was possible. I even sidechained the kick output sends to a compressor input on the bass, overheads, and some guitar tracks for a bit of ducking to reinforce the rhythm. Speaking of rhythm, I mentioned that speed inconsistencies with the microcassette motor mechanism would likely cause fits with tracks drifting in and out of sync with each other, which they definitely did. I lined up the tracks as mentioned in the previous video with clicks at identical times at the beginning and end of each track, but even using time compression and expansion did nothing for variable, inconsistent drift in the audio itself. All that said, it wasn't as bad as I thought, but you can still definitely notice it if you listen critically to the entire song at the end of the video. I did, however, realign everything in time at certain critical passages of the song, and dear God, it felt like herding cats. Guitars drifting away from the snare timing, snare drifting away from the kick timing. You get the point. The track-by-track microcassette import and export process was easier than I speculated in the first video. Really, it was only a matter of a 2.5mm to 3.5mm mono adapter, 3.5mm patch cable, and swapping between the inputs and outputs of the microcassette recorder and laptop. Now, some lofty audio engineers and audiophiles are likely choking right now, but I assure you, I experimented with several interfaces, including my old Tascam 1641 and a Universal Audio Apollo 8. The fact is that for importing and exporting from microcassette, a $2,000 audio interface sounded no better than the headphone and mic ports of my high-end gaming laptop. Now, of course, for recording Adele, of course you track with a $500,000 signal chain. But with microcassette, it'd be a Ferrari in a school zone. My laptop ports were still massively overqualified for this procedure. I'll play all 3 mixes for comparison at the end of the video and leave download links for the mixes below. Each 24-bit 96K uncompressed WAV files. YouTube's audio conversion will of course apply in this video, not that it matters much with a freaking microcassette mix. Before I play all 3 mixes in their entirety for you to click around and compare, I'll sign off. If you're an audio engineer or an audiophile, feel free to get into it in the comments below, and I know you probably will. Let's chat and talk shop. If you think you can do better, please do. I'd love for this to become an experiment between engineers who are also gluttons for punishment. Mixing an entire song using microcassette as the tracking source? Why? Well, if you're a geek like me or a member of the Borg Collective, why is irrelevant and resistance to experimentation is futile. Thank you so much for watching me delve into this very uncharted territory. Remember that we are all geeks about something, so embrace your inner geek. Know that you are worthy of love and your own self-confidence. If you like spazzing out about this type of stuff, be sure to check out the Geek Therapy Radio podcast in your favorite podcast app. Just be sure to look for the red, white, and black color scheme, or really any combination thereof, and share it with your friends. If you'd actually like to help fund any of these silly projects, the Patreon is linked below on my website, and 10% of all that I earn goes to mental health research. But that's it for now. Here are the complete mixes. Take care.
FM.